Hello and happy Tuesday, everyone. I know all 55 of my extremely loyal cultists have been, wondering. I have been preparing this hedgerow behind me, the laurels behind me, to do some scissor splicing project. So I've done videos on scissor splicing in the past, but just so that everything is together, scissor splicing is called scissor splicing because if you take two scissors, you put them together, that's what it is. Self-explanatory. You know what I'm talking about. I'm not gonna explain, okay? But you know. So two branching points, one branch from one tree, one branch from another. You put them together, you wrap them in parafilm. It's the splicing tape that I use. It's like a waxy film. So I kind of feel like a spider wrapping up some prey when I'm making these things. Quick and dirty. So specifically as dirty as possible. No, the point is to keep it clean. So you remove the bark from these two and then you put them together. So it's a clean, you want a clean cut. Not to brag or anything, but my extremely hot wife came up with the idea of just putting them together. You don't need to. You don't need to remove. You don't even remove the skin between, in the crotch of each of these two V's. You could just get them to scissor, raw. And considering the cell walls of that embryonic meristematic sort of tissue is thin and underdeveloped, if they're just pushed into contact and held in place, probably they'll just fuse, right? I don't know. So I'm trying a couple of different techniques. So usually when someone's trimming a laurel, the most basic instinct would be to take the geometric shape that you're trying to achieve with the hedgerow, which in this case would be a rectangular prism that goes across the whole yard, and just trim everything to the outside of that. The issue with that is, as the hedge grows back, all of the canes that start flushing out in new growth come from literally the line that defines the edge of what you want everything contained within. You could compensate for this by making the box a little bit smaller than you actually want it to grow back into, but that isn't quite sufficient. So what I did is I balanced my cuts between right at the end to further back, and I also removed a lot of dead wood from inside and sort of simplified the structure of all of the different laurels. As I showed you in an earlier video, but I'll reiterate here, roots of many tree species are able to actually fuse upon collision. And if you take cross sections, you can see that the wood itself is fused and there's no bark layer in between once that has developed. And how that occurs, I don't know, but that's something I'd like to study. As a consequence of that, I don't know if that laurel is different from that laurel. If they're fused at the root underneath, essentially they're the same individual. I also don't know if when this hedgerow was originally planted, if all of the laurels were just clones of the same organism. But it's very likely that they're all just clones of the same organism, just cuttings that have been planted, rooted, and then grown in a nursery to sapling size and then planted next to each other, and then trimmed into the current configuration. The point is, they're probably compatible for splicing. What I found is, once I had trimmed everything back to the inner portions and things started flushing back, I got a lot of nice whips, nice green canes that were fresh and not woody. And what is perfect about that is they're very flexible and there's a lot of them. So there's very little risk in just splicing a lot of them together. So what I'm going to show you is all of the splices that I've made so far and the general outline. But basically, the whole point of what I've been doing here is to create a lateral structure that goes from the back of the hedgerow around this laundry pole and then back along through the hedgerow a 15-degree angle. I'm not going to demonstrate it with my arms because I'm not going to do that, okay? Fuck Elon Musk. I hope he like currently, like now, okay? But if we follow along all the way, we get to the back behind a shed over there. And there's a bunch of laurel branches that are hanging over behind the shed. And so I created this whole line to go over there and then connect. And then once we're at that area where it's like overhanging, there's a bunch of splices that connect the branches there. And through this process, I realized it's like not so simple as just like one tree here with a branch, right? These two next to each other, put the branches together, and then repeat that over and over again. That's like an oversimplified, almost like textbook example. In real life, you don't get to decide where all the little branches and all the canes are. Having the flexibility of these like brand new, fresh green, bright green whips is that if you bend them a great deal, they're not going to snap. And laurels are especially good for this because they're kind of rubbery. I did try to do the same thing with older canes, or like with older branches that are a lot more woody. And what I found is because of the wind and the tension, they've got a lot of personality, and they'll just tear apart my splices. So these brand new whips are like the perfect thing. If you splice lower down, you start getting these like lateral structures that end up being like ladder rungs. So you can literally, I hope, as those splices take, start climbing on them. And then working your way up and making this into like a whole jungle gym sort of situation, or a jungle Jane situation, if you want to avoid being sexist. Let's say it that way. So I'm just gonna carry you along the hedgerow and show you basically like if this were 9/11 and you were the airplane. Okay, so I'm gonna take you behind the compost bins. Ugh. It's a little bit of a sneak, but I think it's worth it to show sort of what's going on here. So at the back, there is a little bit going on. I'm trying to remember. So here's a splice. There's one, right? You see, if I pull it from this direction, it's strong. If I pull it from this direction, it's also strong. I've got branching that should be able to go past here on the right, and then from here, it should be able to pass on the left. And then on the other side, I've got the same situation. But in this particular instance, the leaf on the other side of the V has died back. So I'm curious to see if that will make a difference. But this should still give this branch something to invest in past the splice. So you want something going either direction, both directions from the splice one way and both directions from the splice the other way, so that water coming up from the base can still evapotranspirate. So basically the tree can keep doing something with this splice on either end, so it has no reason to die back like that. We've got other examples, so it should be possible to find them. There are a few places where, like here, I've got a branch that's become this like long whip, and I've just kind of arranged it intentionally to go sideways because I want this laterality for the sake of actually making this structure a little bit more climbable, because it assists with trimming, but also because like as this develops, you could actually see this becoming something that you could form into more like a structure, something a little bit more architectural. So here we've got, I'm trying to remember, here we go. That's another splice. This one has living material on either end, so that's perfect. Something's definitely gone in here, so I don't know if that's just like wind causing rubbing, but for some reason it seems like this branch is still green and alive, so I'm just gonna leave it and hope for the best. So it carries on. We've got more splicing up here. This thing, where are you? It's not that one. Dun dun dun. Well, this is the part that I find helpful. Oh yeah, and there was a bunch of blackberry. So I ended up having a fight with a great deal of Himalayan blackberry. But here's something. We got up here. So we're going around this post, which is supporting a laundry line. But it's, you know, big chunk of iron in the ground. And there's another splice. This one's done on much older canes. I have stripped bark from both these there. So we'll see. I also found a gummy bear on the ground. So I don't know if you can see it there. But I've been storing this little gummy bear as a protector, you know? The gummy bear is there to protect this place. So we've got this connects. So it's this tree down here on the other side of the fence. It goes up, it goes around this metal pole, comes over here, and then it's placed to this tree. So it's interesting. It's kind of like a topology experiment. Seeing how, like, for example, you go up to this whip. This whip is connected to this tree. Then you follow this down, and it connects this to this, but then this branch actually goes all the way over here. So if you wanted to try and put this into a textbook sort of context, it's like everything in between there is almost irrelevant, because this is the next part of the line. I could try and show every individual splice, but I feel like that's kind of counter to the point. Here's a place where there's a branch that's very lateral that I just encountered when I was trimming. I tried splicing onto it, but it ended up breaking. I tried to use it to splice this to this. That didn't really work because what I was splicing onto was much thicker. And so one side was thick, one side was thin. Didn't really hold. Here's another splice. So this one actually connects this, which is way back here. So it connects something that's like right next to the fence for the other property. And the nice thing is, from here, we've got, it's this thing goes to this, goes to this, goes to this, which eventually connects to the splice. And if I yank on it, it's exactly as strong as the other one. But the really cool thing I found was I've got this, which connects to this splice that I just showed you, but then it also connects to this splice. And this splice here connects all the way back down here, which means that we've basically connected this tree, this tree, this tree, this tree, and that tree all together in this like triangle, but it's all floating. And here's an opportunity, right? Once some slightly healthier material, or if some slightly healthier material comes out of this branch, or this, we can connect that together and have something that carries on. But because I've connected those three trees, I actually have more opportunities. So I just replicated that philosophy here. So you see, this is spliced to this, and then this carries back, and then that means that this and this are the same. So this is the same as this, and then these two are actually spliced together, so we can go back to there, and that's this, which you shouldn't be able to tell, honestly, from the video. Like, I'd be seriously impressed if you were able to tell from the video, but it means that this is connected to that whole splicing chain. So it's kind of a question of how you want to interpret or see what you're creating. In my mind, what makes sense is once you've connected two trees, they're part of what I would call like the splicing chain, and I'm just splicing a whole chain of trees together all the way across. So it doesn't necessarily matter exactly where I'm able to splice, as long as I'm able to splice somewhere between one tree and the next. You can see that there's a splice between these two, And as I'm trimming this in future years, it's going to be interesting to see how easy or difficult it is to identify what has been spliced and what hasn't been. But what I find helpful is just, if I'm not sure on a given branch, to just grab it from one end and give it a wiggle, because it feels very different if it's secured on the other end versus if it's not. And it was a little bit of a puzzle getting from one tree to the next. And the main reason, obviously, that I'm doing these splices here, for example, is to test different methods and see which ones are actually going to be successful in creating a healthy connection that is then going to live on and thicken around that little spliced area. So over time, you're going to get layers of wood building up, getting deposited by the bark as it thickens the branch. So eventually you should be able to get things that are about this thick, right? And then thicker, and then thicker, right? Just connecting sideways through the chain. Obviously, once we get to the overhanging bit, you'll realize, I mean, it's a tree. Branches can hang over stuff. It's not like it really needs me to support that. But it does create a certain opportunity. And I think this one is a perfect textbook example of what it looks like when it's done well. So there's a leaf here. That leaf is right at the junction that I'm splicing on. There's another branch coming from here. It looks healthy. This was spliced 2 weeks ago, so it's had time. If it was gonna rebel on me, it would have. And then this one here is also healthy. We've got healthy tissue there. And then the other side of this one goes on, and that's still green. So for the first 3 weeks, that's been going perfectly fine. Obviously, it's going to be adding material as it is securely attached one side and the other, and has something to contribute to and grow on. I don't see any reason why they shouldn't just start to join. And then once they have, I can undo the tape. But here we've got one splice. Here we've got another splice, right? These two are in parallel. So basically, I've got an idea of what I'm trying to form, but I have no guarantee that a given splice is going to actually work. So by incorporating some redundancy, I have created a more robust, interconnected, sort of multi-dimensional structure. So for example, here we've got a branch, and if I pull on it, you can see that's causing this whole tree over here to move, and that's because these two are spliced together. So there are effects from the wind, where if the wind is blowing at just the right frequency, it should be able to achieve resonance and cause the whole line to move all together. But the more splices are throughout the whole thing, and the more I multiply that characteristic, the more the whole thing should stay together as a unit. And I'm just going to get one good view of what that sort of is meant to enable, because here you can see the laurel branches are kind of going up above my head, and here they're kind of going towards the shed. And if we keep going along, we see I can actually move all of this material at once. It's all connected. Not to sound like someone who's recently experienced ego death and thinks I'm the only person who's ever had that experience, but it's all connected. It's all connected, So there we go. And it just carries on. So eventually I spliced onto something that had a shape that brought it down as kind of like an anchor on the other side, bringing it down to the ground. So this is a good example of something that has that quality. It comes up and then it just goes directly into the canopy. So, or a can of piss, depending on how vulgar you want to be. So then that is there, and then that connects all the way down to the ground. So I found this place. So let me see if I can actually point it out. Right there. Right there. It connects this tree to that tree, and then it carries down all the way to the ground, and it's nice and stable. And then I've got more splices in this area, but the exact characteristics of them are a little difficult to navigate. So I learned a lot from trying to splice these together, and from just the whole process of pruning, and learning how to like climb on the laurels, and where I could put my feet, where I couldn't, what sorts of things worked and what sorts of things didn't, and just like how to work safely and proceed with some level of like caution, but also sanity. And obviously also some of the benefits of lateral splicing within something like a laurel hedge like this. Having the ability to create ladder rungs within a laurel hedge like this has the obvious benefit that anybody trimming it doesn't need to worry about carrying a ladder. As soon as the first 2 or 3 years post splicing are complete, it becomes this like generational benefit that anybody who's splicing these laurels can just climb on them as is, with a lot more confidence and safety. Now, obviously, 3 points of contact and test anything you're going to put your weight on thoroughly before you try and bring a pruning saw up next to your face. You know? I can't be held responsible for anything you choose to do, you know? Just be safe, be careful. Your safety matters. Put that first, you know? Don't be dumb. Let's start with that. So after starting sculpting Tree City's tree-based structures with polymer clay, my first thought after that was maybe I should try making like 3D models of things like this, and then working on those 3D models and trying to create some kind of magnetic field that then causes the trees to conform to that model. And I kind of got stuck because that's complicated. And then I wandered around for a couple years, and eventually I realized I might as well just try getting into some trees and see what I can do. And this has been the result. Like, this is the result of like 2.5 months of work doing a bunch of trimming. There was a big leaf pile. I moved the leaf pile. That's going in the compost. But we've got a whole system of splices here. We've got redundancy. We've got a bunch of different ways of getting along horizontally through this whole hedgerow. And that gives more opportunities, hopefully, if those splices take, gives us opportunities for branches coming off of that to then be incorporated into the structure. And so in this conversation between trimming back and creating splices, there is the opportunity to create something that's actually quite navigable, like something that anyone who's able to stand and move their arms should be able to navigate without too much difficulty. And that much lowers the barrier to entry. And laurel hedging is extremely common. It just happens to be very ideal. They don't snap when they're under a lot of pressure. They just bend. So they have this like very rubbery quality that ends up making them extremely useful for this kind of thing. I would call it toughness. Don't ask me to define toughness, but it is toughness that they exhibit in a like physical, practical, like engineering sort of perspective. In terms of human needs, fruit trees would be perfect to do this with. Apple trees, for example. There are some apple trees on this yard. I'd like to start splicing them together, but the one that's big enough to start working on in that philosophy is far away from the little cluster. So the one where there's a few of them, they're all small. So that doesn't quite work. But with something like this, if you've got a complicated three-dimensional structure that's also creating fruit, it's pretty good start for making something quite habitable. And then how do you put like flat floors? through it. And just take a pipe resting on top of it. So you don't girdle the branch that it's supported on, because that would kill it, which means that you don't have any support for the pipe. But you do that a bunch of times, you get them into a configuration where they're kind of pinned, you've got a solid flat surface to work on. And we can do this anywhere that people have laurel hedging. We can also do this with our street trees. And I'll be doing some diagrams. So watch out. You're going to be seeing diagrams. Anyway, thank you all so much for watching. If you like the video, like the video. If you want to subscribe, do it. You know, you'll be my loyal cultist. If you want to pay me money, you have the option. You have the power. You could do that. There's already one person, you know, paying me $5 a month to, like, try and figure out how the hell to do this. And thank you to her. Thank you, Sasha. As always, remember, no matter who you are, no matter what you're going through, no matter what your situation in life, it is always Tuesday. And have a great day. That's the raw scissor splice. This is the location directly across from the chicken coop. It's like creating a thing. It's like not carving,